Let me jump into the key issues here. Number one, we know that India's excuse or India's reasoning for pulling out of this treaty has been the security concerns after the Pahalgam terrorist attack, and which it is to an extent also blaming on the Pakistani state, but we know that there's no proof on the table right now. So do you think these security concerns are valid enough to pull out of treaty that's survived 70 years?
Well, yeah, absolutely, they're not. So India's justification for suspending the treaty is kind of relied on language from the law of treaties, which include a fundamental change of circumstances and the notion that cross-border terrorism gets in the way of Pakistan's ability to comply with its obligations under the Indus Waters Treaty. So they're kind of merging these two together, saying that there's been a fundamental change of circumstances in which they include their own population growth and climate issues, as well as Pakistan's supposed support of cross-border terrorism. The treaty itself does not include any way in which you could conflate any kind of security concerns with water issues that the treaty was there to address. So the fact that they're trying to rest this case on the fact that Pakistan has supposedly breached the Indus Waters Treaty through terrorism is something which does not comply with any of the provisions that we see in the Indus Waters Treaty itself. The reliance on treaty law as well is on very, very shaky ground in terms of there has not been a fundamental change of circumstances. We know that the Indus Waters Treaty was negotiated over a period of nearly a decade after Pakistan and India had already engaged in wars. And the fact that you already had 2016, the Uri attack, and the 2019 Pulwama attack, and yet we saw no fundamental change in circumstances there. How can you argue this now after the most recent attack, which, again, there is not a shred of evidence to say that Pakistan was involved in?
And besides that, I think the language in the press statements, especially by the Ministry of External Affairs of India, has used the term in abeyance, which also created some confusion because given that the IWT's own language does not really provide for an opportunity for either of the parties or the tripartite agreement to create the situation where either can hold it in abeyance. So what does that really mean, in legal terms?
So in legal terms, we're as confused as everybody else in terms of India's use of this term. In abeyance, we take to mean that they've suspended their operations under the treaty in terms of that they're not going to fulfill their obligations because they're responding to what they perceive to be an internationally wrongful act from Pakistan. Under the treaty, as you rightly pointed out, there is no provision for suspension. It is very normal for treaties to have a provision for suspension. This was on purpose left out during the negotiations, and what they decided was you can modify the treaty so long as you're modifying it with another treaty by the consent of the two states, and you can terminate the treaty so long as you have another treaty to replace this treaty, again with the agreement of both states. So this unilateral action, Pakistan argues, rightly so under international law, is a material breach of the Indus Waters Treaty, which by its object and purpose says that you cannot do such a thing. It does not include a provision for that. And its object and purpose is also frustrated by this material breach by India because the focus was so readily on the cooperation between the two states, which now India has completely withdrawn from.